You are now listening to the Building Her Dream podcast, where we have inspiring conversations with introverted women entrepreneurs who are building their dream lives and businesses on their own terms. Hosted by business operations strategist, author, and the founder of Building Her Dream, Shayla Burton. To learn more about this podcast and our magazine, visit www.buildingherdream.com. Hello, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome to the Building Her Dream podcast. I'm your host, Shayla Burton, and I'm so excited to chat with today's guest. She is Dore, a brand strategist from Sheboygan, Wisconsin. Hello, Asia. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Shayla. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yes, thank you for joining me. Now, I always like to start off with a fun question. So, if you could wake up tomorrow and have your perfect dream life, what would that life look like?
It's such a funny question because I feel like I don't want to pick just one thing. I feel like I don't want to lock my wish down into one thing. So given that answer, I guess it would be to have the ability to wake up and just decide in that day, in that moment, what I want to be doing, where I want to be spending my energy, who I want to see, what I want to work on. My energy is so inconsistent. Some days I'm just like super into it. Some days I feel super social. I want to go out into the world and do things. And other days I just want to like make an Asia-sized hole, like dent in the couch and just like snuggle in and not talk to a soul. And I don't know that that's an introvert thing or just how I am, but I just really don't know day to day how my energy is going to be. So to have the freedom to choose just in any moment what I'm doing, I think is really what my dream life comes down to.
Yeah, I think that's a little bit of an introvert thing because I'm the same.
Okay.
I'm I'm the same. So I make sure to plan my days knowing that. So like I like to wake up without an alarm clock. I haven't had an alarm clock since 2019. And so,
Wow,
but
that's admirable.
well, unfortunately my body wakes me up early anyway. But so
But at least it's your body, not an alarm.
exactly. So I love to just wake up whenever. I try not to have like super early appointments, just in case I'm not in a good mood or my energy is low. I make sure that I don't schedule too many appointments each day. So I like to talk to two people max
Yeah,
each
that's
day.
a good.
Any more than that is going to be a struggle, I know. So
Yeah. And it's so good that as we get older, we learn these things about ourselves so that we can plan our days, especially as entrepreneurs, to structure our days in a way that not only works for us, but also allows us to show up in the best way possible for, whatever we're doing or whoever we're talking to. Because I think that's one of the best things about being an introvert actually is that we can put a lot of care into each interaction we have because we want to be intentional with those interactions. So when we have all of this other stuff going on and our schedules are jam-packed and we're doing stuff we don't feel like doing, it really takes our energy away from those interactions that are actually really important to us.
right, exactly. Well, Asia, why don't you, for those of us who might not be familiar with you, why don't you tell us a little bit about you and the work that you do?
Sure, absolutely. So I am a brand strategist. And basically, what that means is I help entrepreneurs leverage and, more importantly, communicate their unique expertise so they can position themselves as the authority in their space. Because it truly does not matter how brilliant you are at what you do. If you can't explain it to other people, they're not going to understand how you can help them. So they're simply not going to care.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That is really, really important. And I think that is something that many entrepreneurs really struggle with is their brand and their messaging, making sure that it's very clear. Um, yeah.
It is, yeah. And I think entrepreneurs, certain entrepreneurs kind of have it twofold because on one hand, my clients are experts, right? Are pulling from like this huge range of knowledge and tools and experiences and methods and modalities. That's what makes them an expert. They have so many years of experience, right?
Hmm.
But on the other hand, on the other side of that, it starts to feel very mishmashed together at a certain point. And it can be difficult when our expertise is so obvious to us. It can be really difficult to articulate it to other people because we forget that people don't know what we know. That's why we're the experts, right? So, on one hand, we have that working against us. On the other hand, we also have the fact that a lot of times we're very multi-passionate. And since we are pulling from all of these ways we can help people, we don't want to be bogged down. We don't want to be put in a box, right? Because it's like, but I can help people in all of these different ways and I can walk them through all of these different things. And so we don't want to be crammed into a box. And as a brand strategist, that's never my goal to cram you into a box, right? We can still use all of these other tools and modalities and knowledge that you have. It's just about making it very clear to the people that we're helping, right? So it's not about putting you in a box. It's just about making it clear how you can help people.
Yeah, absolutely. I find that, people who have expertise in a certain subject, they use like a lot of jargon that only they understand.
It's so
Which,
easy to do.
oh yeah, for sure. I definitely have had to work on my messaging and making sure that I'm not using those words that like doesn't make sense to my clients or that they might not understand because then they won't understand how I can actually help them.
Exactly. And really, like, that's the whole point of our businesses, right? Is to solve problems for people. So if
Mhm.
people don't understand the solutions you offer, they're going to move along.
Yeah, yeah. Um, what parts of like a successful brand strategy should every entrepreneur focus on? Like what are some key elements?
I mean, there in the brand strategy that I do, there are 11 like core components that you need. I won't go into all of those here because I could talk about it forever. I do have a really informative blog post that I'm happy to share that link. But if I were to just pick one thing, if someone's like, no, Asia, I only have time for one thing, just give me one,
Yeah.
it would have to be your ideal client.
Mm.
And I know everyone is like rolling their eyes. They're like, no, like not another ideal client worksheet. Don't make me do another
Yeah.
one. And I do understand that. I do understand that. But the thing is, our brands aren't for us. They're for our ideal clients. So you can't build a brand for them if you don't know who they are. And I'm not talking about demographics. I'm not talking about where they shop and what their annual household income is. I'm talking about their actual psychology, right? What are they frustrated by? What motivates them? What are they scared of? What are their aspirations? How can we use those things to bridge the gap between who they are and who they want to be, right? Their ideal selves, and then offer services that bridge that gap. And you just can't build a brand if you don't know who you're building it for.
Gotcha. Okay. Great advice. Great advice. Yeah, I definitely hear a lot about, figuring out your ideal client, and I used to struggle with that a lot, just because, when I first started my business, I didn't know who I wanted to work with. Like, I'm new, I need to work with everybody to figure out who I really want to work with. So, yeah, I think that took me a while to get.
Yeah, and if you are new, there's no shame in doing that. I think the
Mhm.
best way to figure out like your zone of genius and what you want to be offering and who you want to be working with and what you actually want to be doing, the best way to do that is just go say yes to everything and process of elimination, right? Because you really have no idea a lot of times until you try, unless you're like a lucky person who's been blessed with like total clarity on all of that. But I've never met an entrepreneur like that, right? It's always a
Right.
process of evolution, and that includes the people we want to work with. But when you get to a certain point, when you are claiming an expertise in a specific area, I think you're actually doing your clients a disservice by not getting really clear about who you will and won't work with. Because
Mm.
you could be working with people who, yes, you can help them, but should you really be helping them if you're outside of your zone of genius? Or should you, gently hand them off to someone who can help them in that very specific way, and then you just stick to the specific thing that you're really good at? Does that make
Mm.
sense?
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. What made you, start your business, especially as a brand strategist?
So I actually started my business almost a decade ago. It'll be a decade in a couple months. I started as a photographer. And this just goes to prove my point about experimenting and saying yes to everything. I eventually found my way to brand photography. And I realized very quickly, like I loved doing that. I loved working with other entrepreneurs, but I realized very quickly that even though they wanted really high quality photographs to represent the quality of work that they did, whether it was a product or a service, they couldn't actually explain to me what their brand was. And I was like, well, I can't photograph it if you don't know what it is. So the strategy piece became a very crucial part of my work as a brand photographer. And after doing that for a while, I realized like, oh, this is the part that really excites me. The strategy piece, like the photography is fun, but the strategy part, I just get to use the part of my brain, very analytical part of my brain that I just couldn't use with the photography. So in 2021, I dropped the photography and strictly focused on strategy.
I love that. I love that. Yeah, that's really cool that you really recognized a need, um, from, doing the photography and then, working with clients and then realizing, okay, well, they need some additional help. And so then it sounds like you pivoted over to the branding, which is really cool.
Yeah, I think a lot of times that's the best way to find our thing. It's
Hmm.
like I said, experimenting, but also I love what you said about like filling a need because that's really where the spot is when there is a gap and you have the skills to fill that gap. It's such a beautiful um, the way that is just that they come together. Really, it's so much easier to build a business that way because not only are you doing something that you love and you're good at doing, but you're also actually helping people solve problems. And the only way you can have a business is if you're selling solutions to problems.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I love that your business is really, I mean, you have like a people-focused business, but you're also an introvert. And yeah, I'm wondering, like, when did you first realize that you were an introvert?
I was actually thinking about that as I was just kind of prepping for our call this morning. I didn't actually realize I was until like my late 20s.
Hmm.
And when I did, it was, oh, gosh, it was such a relief to just know that, like, oh, like, this is why if I'm busy with friends all weekend long, and, just socializing and hanging out and being around people, and then I go to work on Monday, I just hate everything. I don't want to be there. Everything just sucks. And I feel bad about just everything in myself, right? And I didn't really realize that. And then I did find out, oh, you might be an introvert, and it just explained so much. I think, when we're younger, when we're kids, and even into our 20s, I think that we gravitate towards socializing anyway. It's probably like human biology or something. So I don't think it was necessarily a bad thing that I was doing that, but to realize that about myself was so helpful because it allowed me to set better boundaries around my alone time so that
Mhm.
I could show up, to work or with my friends or with my family or whatever in a very intentional way and actually give them the energy and time they deserve instead of just being like half of an Asia.
Yeah, yeah. I definitely resonated when you said it felt like a relief because it was the same for me. I don't think I even heard the term introvert until I was in my 20s. And so it was a relief to realize, okay, there's so many other people similar to me. And so like I'm not a weirdo.
Right. I mean, we are still kind of weirdos.
Yeah, but there's others out there. And so, yeah, it definitely was a relief because growing up, I was just a bit different from other people. Like I recognize like in school, I would see other people, a couple of other people who were like really quiet and kept to themselves. And so I would gravitate to those people because I knew exactly what to say to get them to talk to me. Um, but I was surrounded by a lot of people who are more extroverted. And so yeah, it was definitely great when I, discovered what an introvert meant and I recognized some of the qualities in myself. And so, yeah, for me, it was helpful as well.
Yeah, yeah. And I think the other part of about being a relief, or maybe not the other part, but just to expand on what you said about
Mhm.
that, is that like, oh, like I'm not a weirdo, is that our whole society is built for extroverts.
Yep.
So like of course us introverts would feel like we are weirdos because
Mhm.
it's such an extroverted society and we're taught like I don't know, probably especially as women too, to like always be, friendly and social and
Yeah.
host parties and like whatever it is. So, we have that working against us too, which makes it extra difficult. So I think the relief makes a lot of sense.
Hmm. Yeah, for sure. What were some of the challenges that you have faced as you are, growing your business?
Oh man, that's such an open-ended question. Like, how much time do we have? I mean, there have been so many. I feel like, Shayla, I don't even know where to begin. Do you mean
But what's
specifically as
what's
an introvert?
no, not necessarily, just in general. Like what's one of the biggest challenges you've had to overcome um
Okay, that's
as a
fair.
business owner?
That's fair. I feel like specifically as an entrepreneur, the most difficult thing for me personally has been developing my self-trust and trusting
Hmm.
my intuition, which I don't know if that's kind of a cheater answer because it's not super specific. But when
No.
I think back to the challenges, the specific challenges, like tangible challenges I have faced, I think the reason they were so difficult is because I didn't trust myself in the moment to make a decision or to, like even ignoring red flags from clients is a great
Mm-hmm.
example. When like this isn't really my person, but I'm going to take them because the money would be nice and I want to help them or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And even around boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but also on the other side of that, comfort zone, right?
Mm-hmm.
Even doing stuff like this used to be a lot more difficult because I didn't trust my own knowledge and my own expertise. So building that trust has really helped me put myself in situations that might not necessarily be comfortable, but that are in the end very fulfilling and rewarding and good for my business.
Yeah. So it, I bet that's something that other people have dealt with as well. So how did you go about like building trust in yourself?
Just making a lot of dumb mistakes failing and being okay with that. Like it really comes down to trusting the process. And I hate myself for saying that because I hate trusting the process personally. I
Okay.
really do. I want to do things and I want them to just be perfect the first time and I want it to work out. So going through like the process of failing and making mistakes is not fun for anybody. But it is so necessary, I believe, for building that self-trust because you can look back on experiences and say, oh, this thing that's annoying that's happening now reminds me of this. And this is what I learned during that time. So I'm going to apply that here. And I know I'm going to be okay because I was okay then when I failed, right? And if
Mm,
I was okay then when I failed, I'm definitely going to be okay now. When sure, I might fail again, but at least I'm failing a little bit more intentionally.
mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thank you for sharing that because now I'm trying to think like, did I have self-trust issues? Like definitely have dealt with like imposter syndrome and struggled with like setting boundaries and like in the beginning stages of my business. So I'm wondering like, well, was that a trust issue for me as well?
I mean, I don't want to speak for you, but like when you were saying that, especially about the boundaries, it's like, yeah, I think so. Or imposter syndrome. Imposter syndrome is just us not trusting our own expertise, really. It's
Yeah.
diminishing all of the, skills and knowledge and experience that we bring to the table. But if we trust that that's valuable, then we're able to present it in a way that makes it valuable to other people as well.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Probably. So I have to reflect on that. I know that, once I started realizing about the imposter syndrome, I made it a point to track and like collect all of the positive things that like my clients have said about me and about the work that I do so that when it did start to creep up, I can just go back and read what they said. I don't know, maybe I trusted their opinions more than my own.
Well, that's a great exercise, first of all, because I feel like the
Yeah.
more external evidence we can give our brains, the easier it is to build self-trust because it like data is irrefutable, right?
Right.
So that at least that helps me having the logic behind it. So I think that's a great exercise, but I agree with you. There was probably a lot of underlying, like, okay, well, I don't believe that I'm really good at what I do, so I'm going to go seek external validation that I'm good at what I do. And that can be a very slippery slope. I think it's good to have both. Obviously, we want to take external feedback because if everyone's saying, like, Shayla, you suck at your job, then that's good to know, right? Because then we change some
Right.
things on the back end. But if everyone is saying, Shayla, you're great at your job, then that's like, oh, okay, great. And also, I believe it. Like it has to be both.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. What's something that you're really proud of that you've accomplished in your business so far?
Honestly, this is going to sound a little bit cheesy considering what I do, but I am most proud of the brand that I've built. And the reason I am is because I truly believe that if you have a solid brand strategy, that allows you to work however you want to work, doing whatever you want to do in the very specific way you want to do it with the very specific people you want to work with. And even though I started as a photographer and I pivoted a lot of times within photography, to specialize different things as I experienced different photo shoots and worked with different clients. So a lot of specialties within photography, but then also pivoting away from photography when I had already built my whole business on photography, to pivot successfully into something really totally new, but also while keeping a lot of elements of my brand the same. Like even though I pivoted from between two different industries, I didn't actually rebrand because I had already built so much on the foundation of who I was and who I wanted to work with. Sure, my ideal clients changed in that they had a different problem, but their psychology was still so much the same. They were still so much the same types of people. especially personality wise and goals wise, that it wasn't actually that difficult to move. It was just like, hey guys, I'm doing this now. And everyone was like, oh, cool. And I even had some
Yeah.
people who had been in my world as a photographer who didn't need photography, but now they needed me as a brand strategist. Right. So my ability to do that and to, switch gears and change directions and pivot, I really believe that that building a brand instead of just a business was the reason I was able to do that so successfully and so seamlessly. Um, and I know that it's going to serve me into the future as well if I decide to pivot in the future, which could very well happen because we're always evolving as entrepreneurs.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Wow, that's a great success story. Basically, yourself, you are the success story within branding.
Yeah, it definitely helps me show up with conviction that this stuff works because I do have, not only happy clients, but I also have firsthand experience that when you build your brand this way, it gives you so much more freedom and flexibility in the future.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Do you think being an introvert has affected your business at all?
I think that it did in the beginning,
Mhm.
especially when it came to setting boundaries and even just business policies and working the way I wanted to work. Because I felt like I needed to be available all the time. I felt like I needed to be very facey all the time. I
Mhm.
felt like I needed to go to all of these like networking events and like give clients my phone number and like all of these things that I super did not want to do as an introvert, but I felt like I had to,
Yeah.
because that's kind of what we're taught as entrepreneurs, right? In our extroverted world. So that was really tough towards the beginning. But again, developing that self-trust, going through failures, giving clients your phone number and having it be a huge mistake and being like, I'm never doing that again. All of those things, I think, helped me really lean into the boundary side. But I think the other thing that was actually super helpful about being an introvert in business is that, like I said before, we are more intentional with where we put our energy and who we use our energy on. That's not a good way to say it. Who we give our energy to is probably a nicer way to say that. We can and should be more intentional. And I think that just makes for such better, more quality relationships. And
Yeah.
business is relationships, right? That's like
Yeah.
business 101. So I think that introverts actually have a huge superpower when it comes to that, because since we are so intentional, even when you were like, only taking 2 calls a day, whatever it was, it's like, that serves you, yes, but it also serves the 2 people you're talking to because no one else is getting your energy that day.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is so true. Um, Speaking of energy, like what do you do to recharge? So, like for me, I know I need a lot of alone time.
Yes.
Especially when I have a busy day, when I've been interacting with a lot of people. I need like a full day of not talking to anybody. And so, like when after I host my networking events the next day, I make sure that my calendar is clear so I can just be by myself if I want to and really recharge. What are some things that you do to like recharge your energy?
Yeah, I think it depends. Again, it depends on the day and what kind of energy I'm working with that day.
Yeah.
But I've really found that exercising, like working out by myself, is very helpful, even if it like whether it's strength training or I'm just going for a really long walk around the neighborhood by myself. But also like sometimes I just lay on the couch and watch an entire season of like really bad reality TV. As long as I'm not talking to other humans, I feel like that's a good recharge for me. And it just depends on um even the kind of energy I have. Sometimes I have energy, but just not social energy.
Yeah.
So yeah, as long as I'm like away from people, that's usually a good indicator that I can recharge.
Yeah, same here. And I do like to watch reality TV as well. Sometimes people are like, why do you watch that stuff? And I'm like, because it's brainless. I don't have to think that hard.
Yes.
Like sometimes I want to watch something that, I need to think and really pay attention to, but sometimes my brain needs a break. And so reality TV is really good for that.
That's such a good point. Yeah, when you said the brainless thing, it's yeah, you're right. It's like not only do we sometimes need a break from other people, we also kind of need a break from ourselves. Our brains are always going, going, going. So to just like focus on something stupid, to just turn it off is, I didn't really realize that until now. I always kind of thought it was like, oh, as long as I'm alone, it doesn't matter.
Mm.
But I think you're right. Anything that can shut the brain off is a good way to recharge. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Mm. You mentioned earlier about stepping outside of your comfort zone. I think you did. Like, do you do any type of like networking? Do you attend like networking events or anything like that?
I have been trying to go to more in-person stuff. You already said I'm in Sheboygan, but I moved here a couple years ago from the West Coast. And it's hard to make friends as an adult. I mean, even not even
Yeah,
friends, but even just like, to meet people as an adult, because we are all have our own lives already and we're
yeah,
at home. And especially in our 30s, we just kind of want to, do our own thing. So it can be difficult as an adult. It can also be difficult in a new area because we didn't know anyone when my fiance and I moved here. We didn't know anyone, which made it a fun adventure. But then it was also kind of like, oh no, like we don't have
yeah,
any friends now. And then on top of that, I don't have kids, so I'm not going to meet people, other parents or something.
right.
And obviously, I work from home, so I'm home most of the day. So anyway, that's a very roundabout way of saying that I've been trying to prioritize those in-person events just because if I don't put myself in those situations on purpose, I'm not going to meet people because I'm just going to
Yeah.
be at home. But one thing that's been really working for me the past couple weeks, and even like the way that I became connected to you, Shayla, is networking online.
Mm-hmm.
I've been using Facebook and Facebook groups, which has been really actually fun. I deleted my like personal Facebook years and years ago. But I rejoined just for the groups and I've met like a lot of really cool fellow entrepreneurs in just the last few weeks. And I've been having so many coffee chats. And I booked a few discovery calls too. So that's been a really fun way for me to feel part of a community while also
Yeah.
not leaving my house, which is great.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really good. Yeah, I've done. So I haven't really attended like in-person networking events, and I'm still trying to work out how to make it work for me because that gives me a whole lot of anxiety. So I do a lot of networking online. Like you mentioned, Facebook groups have been super helpful for me as well. Um, but yeah, I think we just gotta figure out what works for us because we do need to network. Like I know networking is like a terrible word. Sometimes introverts don't really like that word, but it's necessary to grow our businesses, unfortunately.
It is, and I hear you on figuring out a way that it works for you. I will
Mhm.
share the way that it works for me if it's helpful to anyone listening, because I used to feel the same, and I still kind of do. Like if I had the choice to not go to a networking event, I'd be like, no, thank you. But like I said,
Yeah.
I'm trying to force myself into those situations, right? But the thing that has been most helpful for me is just to be like obnoxiously, audaciously myself
Mm.
because it's such a good way to weed out your people versus not your people. And maybe this is also me just like getting older and like caring less and less what other people think. But I've just found that, when I used to go to these things, it would be like, okay, like I have to be super professional and I have to be on my best behavior and I have to make a good first impression. And now I'm just like, no, I'm just going to be myself. And the people who, are cool with that and match my energy, I'm going to connect with. And the people who won't, like, thank God I didn't waste more time on them because they're not my people. And that's okay because there's 8 billion people in the world, right? So I don't know if that's helpful to anyone, but it's been very freeing for me. And it's made the whole networking thing so much more fun.
Yeah. Just be yourself.
It's such cliche advice, but like it really does work.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I'm gonna have to give that a try and maybe force myself to attend a couple before the year is over.
I mean, it might be worth experimenting with, but on the other hand, there are so many ways to market ourselves as entrepreneurs now with the internet. Like it's
Yeah.
really, if something feels like there's uncomfortable as like a comfort zone stretch, and then there's uncomfortable like icky. So
Yeah.
if you can kind of discern that, I think that's helpful. But if something is icky to you, like pick something else. There are
Right.
so many ways to market and even to network. Just like experiment with something new. You don't have to force yourself to do something because you're not going to show up as your best self if you do anyway. So it kind of defeats the
Right.
purpose. Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, that was really good advice. And Asia, I would love to. I've got more questions, but we are short on time, so I don't want to keep you here forever. Before we go, I wanted to give you the opportunity if you wanted to share anything else with our listeners, you can do that now. And then also just let us know where we can find you.
Yeah, absolutely. I would love to invite your listeners to a 30-minute brand audit. And I know an audit does not sound super fun, but it's actually really helpful because we're going to determine whether this brand that you have been working so hard to build is actually communicating your expertise, which is a good thing to know because, if you're going to work hard at something, it needs to be working for you. During that call, it takes place via Zoom. We're also going to brainstorm new ways to leverage what makes you unique in your industry, and then decide on 3 really practical and simple changes that you can make to grab the attention of your ideal clients. They are also free. And the reason they're free is because branding can feel so conceptual. So this 30 minutes really gives us a chance to, well, first of all, meet each other and speak face to face, which is always helpful. But it also allows you to see how my expertise can be applied directly to your business. So it gives you something a little bit more tangible to chew on. And the link for that is just asiadore.com/brand audit. And they're really fun. They're really helpful. I know, again, audit doesn't sound fun, but they really are really fun. There's a lot of energy. So yeah, that's where I would direct people if they're interested in learning more about what I do as a brand strategist and whether I can help them in their business.
Awesome. So we'll include the link to your website and the audit in our show notes. Asia, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me, Shayla. It was really fun.
You're welcome. And thank you to our audience for listening. This has been another episode of the Building Her Dream podcast. If you've enjoyed it, why don't you go ahead and subscribe, leave us a review, and stay up to date with what we're doing by visiting www.buildingherdream.com.